Hi, it's Gal Pastor / Gal Historian today. One particular story in my recent listenings of Mark always captures my attention, and it's Mark's rendition of John the Baptist's death in chapter 6. Mark tells it sort of as a side note to explain further another storyline, but this triangular connection between Herod, John, and Jesus has been of interest to me for a while, and the more research I did on Herod and his ancestry, the more convinced I became that these two storylines, John the Baptist's and Jesus's, involving Herod, are intertwined and illuminating one another. We'll mine the dynamics of these relationships today, focusing primarily on two different events, each in a palatial setting in Jerusalem, both involving Herod. One a birthday party, and another sort of end-of-life event, the trial of Jesus. Now, my research had to start with Herod, actually plural. So many Herods. It's kind of like who is who of the Herodian dynasty. A bit easier to comprehend for me than who is who in the Kardashian dynasty, but still, so many Herods. To the best of our understanding, we're talking about 4 generations of 6 different Herods in power over a varying amount of Jewish lands, spanning decades before and decades after Christ's birth. The best recent book on the history of the Herodian dynasty, in my opinion, is Bruce Chilton's Herods. The first Herod, Antipater, converted to Judaism and ruled Idumea, a large territory south of Judah, on behalf of the Maccabean kings. He was connected to some very distinguished Romans, and when Julius Caesar was assassinated, this Herod's choice to work against Mark Antony's doomed union with Cleopatra proved lucrative for him. This first Herod's son, Herod, inherited his father's 2 pillars of devotion to Judaism and loyalty to Rome. Roman Emperor Octavian made this Herod king of Judea, Herod the Great. I'm going to talk more about him and his massacre of the boys in Bethlehem in my upcoming Christmas video. As Roman Emperor Octavian ruled, Chilton tells us, he took the title Augustus, in keeping with his devotion to his adoptive father's cult of divine Julius. Roman imperial power was a theocratic assertion, as well as a dominant military, economic, and political force. There were religious underpinnings to the ideology of the empire. Herod framed a version of his own theocratic ambitions, deliberately crafting, Chilton tells us, a dynastic claim grounded in Roman might and Israel theocracy. Herod went on to quash various rebellions and won victories for Rome and the Jewish people, all the while building important architectural sites for Rome and the Jewish people, of which the greatest one, of course, is the Temple in Jerusalem. Herod the Great rebuilt it. One thing he missed, though, this king of the Jews did not have Davidic lineage. He did marry a Maccabean princess named Mariame, wanting his children to be legitimate royalty of the Maccabean line. Now, when I tell you that supposedly Emperor Augustus had said of Herod the Great that it was safer to be his pig than his son, you might get an idea of what kind of people we're dealing with here. Herod executed his 3 first sons and wrote the 4th, Herod Philip I, out of his will. According to well-established historical records, he died in 4 BC. After Herod's death, the Roman government divided his kingdom into 4 different sections, which were ruled by tetrarchs. There were only 3 tetrarchs, Antipas, Archelaus, and Philip. Herod Antipas is the protagonist in today's story. And he ruled for about 40 years. He moved to Galilee, where he fortified the city of Sepphoris, only a few miles from Nazareth. He also built a new city on the western shore of the Sea of Galilee and named it Tiberias after the Roman Empire. Antipas divorced his Nabatean wife, the daughter of the king of the desert kingdom adjoining to his own, to marry Herodias, who was at the time still the wife of his half-brother Philip. But supposedly 'twas true love. Now, this is what I want us to keep in mind as the background to our biblical mining. The Herodian dynasty's ideology, sort of programmatic statement, Herod and his offspring knew how to play the politics of God. This is how Chilton phrases this. Their violence and their sophistication complemented one another as they consolidated the power of their dynasty by means of military prowess and political skill, and projected their dominance by resorting to public spectacle, massive projects of building and charity, and their appropriation of the traditional symbols of Israelite power. All this, of course, while appeasing the Roman masters. As for the Jewish people and religious leaders over whom Herod reigned, a lot of them were greatly uncomfortable with a dynasty that was not descended from King David, considering them illegitimate Jewish royalty. But they were there for the upside, of course, the temple, the buildings, the power. When it came to Jesus and John, we see Pharisees and Sadducees constantly siding with the Herodians against the two. So on one hand stands Herod Antipas and his family line. On the other hand, we have the two cousins from Galilee, the two boys who knew of each other from the time they were in their mother's wombs, who grew up together, presumably made the pilgrimage to Jerusalem annually in the family caravan, who were activated into ministry one after another, who died close together in time, while involved in the establishment of the one and the same kingdom. Now, Jewish people at that time have no experience of what having a powerful spokesperson from God among them feels like, but they do have their stories and scrolls. John is everything you imagine a prophet would be. After 400 years of silence, he has all the eccentricities, and beyond that, his message is charismatic and powerful, and he just won't shut up. He's a straight shooter, probably cringingly confrontational. If you're there, you can't believe things he's saying and who he's saying them to. He can't shut up. This is who he is. This is what he came to do. He has surely learned about his father's 9 months of silence, and John is here to talk about one greater than himself and his kingdom, and call to repentance regardless of social and political class. He's committed, unwavering, can't stop doing what he was called to do, even if it kills him. And so we learn that one of his confrontations is with the king, tetrarch, Herod Antipas. Matthew tells us that John rebuked Herod because of his marriage to Herodias, his brother's wife, and all the other evil things he had done. The Gospels differ slightly in whether Herod wants to kill John or just shut him up temporarily, have him cool off a bit in jail. Several synoptics signal that there is also some sort of curiosity or interest in Herod Antipas for John's message, but it is so very ambiguous, and they definitely don't highlight any potential for the repentance and believing there on Herod's part. And so we get to the witness of the synoptics about John's execution, the murder of the prophet. Mark's dramatic storytelling ability strikes again when he invites you to Herod's birthday party. Lots of details are related here. I'm not going to read the whole text in Mark 6. I am going to draw your attention to several details. Note who is invited. On his birthday, Herod gave a banquet for his high officials and military commanders and the leading men of Galilee. It's a mixture of Romans and Jews, creme de la creme of the society. Imagine the lavish foods being passed around on platters, and then the entertainment, the weird dancing. Herodias' daughter Salome dances, and what does the dancer want for her reward? She doesn't want half of the kingdom offered to her by her stepfather/uncle. She wants what her mother wants: revenge on the prophet. I want you to hear the silence of the guests in the long seconds awaiting the birthday ruler's decision. Are the leading men of Galilee, these are the religious leaders, rejoicing to see this guy who rubbed them the wrong way go? Or is there a tingle of terror, of fear of God in them as they hear the request and wait for Antipas to respond? And when the freshly severed head is brought out on another food platter, see the mother's, Herodias' triumph over it, and then see the devastated disciples of John sneaking into the palace through the back door, retrieving and burying the rest of his body. I think the murder of John the Baptist is a hugely significant story in the Gospels. That it is done solely by the Jewish ruler, without a word against it from the Jewish religious leaders present in the room. Their silence is stunning, and it is powerful. When Luke in his 8th chapter lists a group of women following Jesus and providing for his ministry, among them is Joanna, the wife of Chuza, the manager of Herod's household. Perhaps this is the insider who gave details about the birthday party, and also provided details of Herod's continued uneasiness in the aftermath of John's execution. When the word about Jesus' ministry reaches Herod, we get a privileged and a telling look into the royal mind and conscience. He goes straight to John. Has he resurrected? Perhaps he can't shut him up. For all we know, the prophet had still been speaking in Herod's nightmares. And now there were two. In the aftermath of John's death, our focus changes to Jesus and Herod Antipas. Jesus is beyond doubt shaken by John's death. Matthew tells us as much. When he heard of John's death, Jesus withdrew to a lonely place. Some commentators say that it's because of Pharisees relating to Jesus that Herod is plotting to kill him that he withdraws. I think it's more complicated than that. The brutal murder of John is personal to Jesus and his family. It's an enormous loss. But also this murder solidifies Jesus' path. Now things are really in motion. It is happening. This is what these people do to the prophets. What if God finally sends his son? And so, when warned about Herod's intention, Jesus sends him a message, and it is heartbreaking and packed with judgment and tender expressions of love, Jesus replies, "Go tell that fox I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal. In any case, I must press on today and tomorrow and the next day, for surely no prophet can die outside Jerusalem. Jerusalem, Jerusalem, you who killed the prophets and stoned those sent to you. How often I have longed to gather your children together as a hen gathers her chicks under her wings, and you were not willing. Look, your house is left to you desolate. I tell you, you will not see me again until you say, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord." It's kind of a eulogy for John and Jerusalem, an ode echoing many Old Testament sentiments, and also a word of condemnation for Herod. It's a word of determination from Jesus. He will stick to his calling and finish his mission. And finally, we enter the palace for the last time to witness a scene of confrontation between Herod Antipas and Jesus. It's a fascinating encounter. Listen to hear Herod Antipas plying Jesus with questions for a long time, we are told. We are not told what he asked. Listen to hear chief priests and teachers of the law now vehemently accusing Jesus. I think we must understand that these are the same people who were utterly silent at the birthday party. But Jesus gave Antipas no answer. When in front of the chief priests, Jesus will be equally silent, except to say when asked, "Are you the king of Jews? You said so." But here in front of Herod, Jesus does not speak one word. His silence is loud and powerful. If you listen to Jesus' teachings throughout Mark with Herodian dynasty in mind, you'll be astonished how so much of what he says about the kingdom, love, and servanthood can be understood as directed at powers that be, at Herod himself. I'll never stop being surprised at the rich layers and layers of biblical message, of Jesus' message. The words he uttered are just so brilliantly chosen and so targeted then and now. But here, even his silence is profoundly impactful. His calling is not to talk, it is to die. Within several hours, Jesus will be dead, and Herod will be eating a lavish Passover meal. But about 5 years later, the Nabatean king, whose daughter Antipas has repudiated to marry Herodias, attacked Herod's realm, inflicting severe damage. Rome was not quick to help him, and in fact Antipas's past of Roman intrigue caught up with him when Caligula accused him of sedition and banished him and Herodias to Gaul in France. The Herodian dynasty continued with Agrippa I and Agrippa II, who acted as client kings for Rome until the Jewish revolt, which started in 66 AD and culminated with the sacking of Jerusalem by the Roman general Titus. The fall of Jerusalem in 70 AD and the destruction of the temple buildings is the beginning of the end. Agrippa II, a grandson of Herod the Great, will be the last Herod on the throne ever. When you think about it, there was only one way this was going to end for the last prophet John the Baptist. It is a classic tale of prophet meets king, prophet tells king the truth, prophet is killed. The fact that this last prophet is so important and so close to Jesus speaks volumes, I think, about the special place of other previous prophets in God's heart. This is the last time ever in history that the Jewish king will meet God's appointed prophet and kill him. Nevermore. What then is there more to say for Jesus? The only thing left for him is to die with the prophet. Decades after Jesus' death and resurrection, the young church grew and spread unstoppable, leaving the glorious Jerusalem temple behind in ruins and expanding into the world. The kingdom of Jesus and John persisted long after the Herodian dynasty was dead and buried.